Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. I'm Matt Levin. I'm the Executive Director of the Vermont Early Childhood Advocacy Alliance. And we're so happy that folks are here. On behalf of the co-hosts, the Alliance, Let's Grow Kids, and Building Bright Futures, I want to welcome you and thank you for coming to the 28th Annual Early Childhood Day at the Legislature. As we begin our work this morning, we're grateful for the organizations, businesses, funders, and agencies that have made contributions to make this day possible, including the Turtle Fund and the Vermont Community Loan Fund. Other sponsors are listed on the Whova page, and we encourage you to take the time to look over that list and visit their websites. I want to take just a moment to recognize the staff of the members of Vermont's congressional delegation who are joining us today. Polly Major from Senator Leahy's office, who we'll be hearing from shortly, and Brooke Grams from Congressman Welch's office. I also want to take just a moment to note the backdrop for our gathering today, a rather serious backdrop. The pandemic continues to negatively impact our communities across the globe. Wars are bringing violence and destruction to millions of people in the Ukraine and elsewhere. And in our own country, we continue the long work of acknowledging our complex history. We are hosting today's gathering from the stolen, occupied traditional land of the Abenaki and Mohican people, and definitions and norms and histories generated by the dominant white culture have been and continue to be hurtful and exclude many. ECDL is a time for us to come together to advance the needs of all of Vermont's children and families. We at the Alliance are in an ongoing process of recognizing where we have failed to do so in the past and are working to do better in the future. For all these things, it is truly a sobering moment. And I didn't want us to not recognize that today. On a more positive note, looking at today's schedule, we've done everything we can to try to replicate the special qualities that make ECDL such a great event. We've got some exciting speakers both this morning and later in the afternoon, workshops that will give you updates on the issues you care about, and there are lots of updates. Things are definitely moving in the State House, and a virtual lunch so you can talk directly with legislators about those issues. While we are once again virtual for the most part, your voices are absolutely going to be heard today and throughout the rest of the legislative session. So thanks for making the commitment today and in the weeks ahead to speak out in support of issues that are so important to Vermont's children and young families. If you have any technical questions or if you need any help along the way, don't hesitate to ask. You can call or text or chat anytime. You'll see information about the staff in the chat. There's a lot of activity in the chat, so it's a little hard to post it there, but please be in touch if you have any questions and we'll be sure to answer them. So our agenda starts with comments from a few speakers for the next 20 minutes or so, and then we move to our workshops around 10 a.m. Our first speaker is Senator Becca Balint, who serves as the President Pro Tem of the Senate. In that role, which she has held since January of 2021, she oversees the body's activities as it works through its annual legislative process and presides over the Vermont Senate in the absence of the Lieutenant Governor. She also works directly on many of our community's issues as a member of the Senate Economic Development, Housing, and General Affairs Committee. It is a pleasure to welcome, please join me in welcoming Senator Becca Balint. Senator.
Thank you, Matt. Really nice to see you this morning. Good morning, all. It's great to be here with you all this morning. I want to welcome all of our social service providers, our community partners, our agency leaders, our early childcare educators, parents, and everyone who has been a part of our system of care and education for our youngest Vermonters. And I'm really glad that you've taken time to be here this morning to help us hear directly from you. That's how we make the best policy. So at this point, I want to ask Cindy to share a picture with all of you. Thank you, Cindy. This is a picture of the night I won my first primary. And the little peanut in my right arm is my daughter, Sarah. And the little bit bigger peanut in my left arm is my son, Abe. And I wanted you to see that because a lot of the work that I've done here in the Senate has absolutely been really shaped by my experience as a parent in Vermont. So thanks, Cindy. We can come back from that. And so I wanted you to see that because that night was such an exciting night for me. And it was also a really scary night because my wife and I looked at each other and we said, okay, now that you've won the primary, now that I have been successful, and I was probably going to win the general because after all, it is Windham County. You thought, how are we going to make this work? You know, how was I going to serve in the legislature and be home from far away from home so much? And those first few years in the Senate were incredibly rough. My spouse and I worked so hard on so many fronts to allow me to serve as a legislator. It wasn't easy, and I can tell you it wasn't pretty. And we both know that without the terrific childcare that my daughter received, I would not be President Pro Tem right now, because I would have quit a long time ago. That's the reality for so many parents who want to be in politics. So all of you on Zoom this morning, you are the powerful advocates and the early childhood professionals that enable parents and families across the state to do our work and to be fully engaged in our communities and to provide for our families. And so I wanted to start by thanking you most sincerely, because as I head into the second half of my last session in the legislature, I want you to know just how much I appreciate all of you and all of this work that we've done together. And I know I wouldn't have been able to successfully advocate for so many of the issues that we care so deeply about if it weren't for all of you. My experience as a parent and as an educator myself are at the core of why I ran for office in the first place. And the reason why I've done the work that I've done in the Senate and championed that work on childcare, on sick leave, on healthcare, on housing. And when I started in the Senate, early childhood issues did not have the strong tripartisan support they do now. It took a lot of hard work inside and outside of the State House by all of you and all of the legislators who have been my colleagues over these years, and all the constituents that I've talked to. And I want you to understand that sometimes when you're in the middle of something, it feels like you're never going to get there, especially in our work in the legislature. You really have to take the long view. There's so many partners on this Zoom right now who have been successful in taking the long view and keeping us all focused on what we're going to get done long term. One of the things that we need to talk about, and I say we, all of the colleagues that are on this call right now and who have been part of this work, we had to talk more about what families are dealing with now, the debt they're carrying, the housing costs that have gone up, the healthcare costs that have gone up, how everything is more expensive for young families. And that most Vermont families have to have two parents working outside of the home to make ends meet. Legislators who were grandparents started to get more firsthand experience of the realities faced by young families. Many of them started to hear about childcare from the businesses in their communities. Businesses said they couldn't find and retain good workers for their businesses because their workers were so directly impacted by a lack of childcare. You helped make these connections, and you helped educate all of those people out in the community who now understand the brain science and the importance of early childcare to not just brain development and healthy children, but also prevention of all kinds of problems for kids later on. So as Matt alluded to, many of you are aware that the pandemic created a new level of urgency, but also opportunity on this front. COVID has placed incredible challenges on all of us, families, children's providers, small businesses. At the same time, the general public, employers, and lawmakers became more acutely aware of the impact that the childcare crisis was having on the entire economy. And that we realized that the most essential pieces of our economy and public safety literally couldn't function without accounting for the care of young children and without continuing to support our working families. So as a result, my colleagues and I have worked incredibly hard to get federal pandemic response assistance into the communities and to our constituents. And this has been obviously welcome relief for so many families. And you have been a huge part in making this possible. And as we return to in-person legislation, I have to acknowledge that although our Zoom sessions were incredibly hard, it also enabled so many more parents and advocates and community partners to have a direct line to the legislature. People who couldn't testify before, because folks like from my neck of the woods in Windham County, you just can't drive 2 hours up to Montpelier, testify, and take another 2 hours to drive home. So oftentimes in the past, those voices hadn't been heard. So going forward, I really hope long after I'm in this building, I hope that we will continue to find and keep ways for folks out in the community to have direct lines to the legislative process. And I also wanted to say, I know I speak for the entire Senate this morning, that we appreciate the collaborative spirit that allowed us all to work together to support the childcare and the after school care providers, the transition from shelters to other housing for families experiencing homelessness, and also keeping food distribution systems working in the community. I also value the work that this coalition is doing to bring an equity lens to your work and to acknowledge that the children and families who historically haven't been well served in our systems of care must be at the center of our policy conversations and our decision making. While together, we have made important progress on so many fronts in elevating the importance of supporting young children and families, increasing our investments, and making good policy. You know what I'm going to say? There's still more to do. And we have to continue to come together as champions to continue making this work happen. I want to thank you most sincerely for your work on behalf of Vermont's children and families, and for taking the time to participate in this critical process. Your voice matters. We are listening deeply, and we're taking that input with us into our committee rooms to actually get the work done. But on a more positive note, circling back around to that picture that I shared with you at the beginning, as one of the very few women who has ever made it to this level of political leadership within the legislature, I want to thank you. I want to thank you. We always say representation matters, and we say it takes political courage to run for office. And both of these things are true, but representation can only happen with systems in place to support women like me. Thank you for all you do, and I know I'll see you around the State House.
Thank you, Senator Ballant. Appreciate your comments this morning. I want to quickly move to our next speaker, who is Lieutenant Governor Molly Gray. She was elected to the position last November and has worked throughout her term to make connections with Vermonters around the state and engage communities on issues of concern to them. So thank you so much for being here today, Lieutenant Governor Gray. The floor is yours.
Thanks, Matt. I was actually elected in 2020, so not last November, but
that's right.
So delighted to be serving as your Lieutenant Governor. It's been an exciting week because for the first time, senators are in the building in person. I'm going to be presiding today for the second day with members in the State House in person. That's really exciting. But I'm sorry you all can't be in the State House in person. I think there's 158 participants here today. I've been watching the chat, looking at the names, the locations, the centers and representatives zooming in from across the state. And to returning advocates, I think, Matt, you said this is what, 28 years? That's incredible. 28 years for new advocates. Welcome to the legislative process. To old advocates, welcome back. I just want to applaud Vermont Early Childhood Advocacy Alliance, all of the Alliance members, Let's Grow Kids, Allie Richards, and the entire Let's Grow Kids team, Building Bright Futures. We would not be where we're at today without your incredible work. And what do I mean by that? One, just helping families day in and day out get through this pandemic as truly unsung heroes. And I know that we are not entirely through it yet, but I'm hopeful that we are finally turning the page or entering a new phase. You've been on the front lines, helping families, helping employers, keeping communities safe, making sure that our children still have access to early childhood education. I had the pleasure after the session ended last June to get out in communities across Vermont to meet with so many of you. I just want to thank you for welcoming me, sharing your experiences, sharing your stories. I was really proud to put together a report for our legislative leaders and the governor with a lot of the requests that you have. I know that we need to support you with paid family and medical leave. We need to support you with better pay, with a lifeline, an immediate lifeline now, not just that initial 29 million from ARPA funds or the 9 million from the budget adjustment last week, but continued funding. And you deserve our every support. I see you, I hear you, I get that. So I just want to thank you. I want to recognize your incredible work. I'm hopeful because of the moment that we're in and what you've accomplished. I think Vermont is leading the country. I don't think Vermont is leading the country in setting up a framework that's going to make childcare a reality for every family. And my hope is that with this omnibus bill, I know Polly's here from Senator Leahy's office and probably has some exciting news given what was passed last night. Even with Build Back Better, perhaps off the table, that there is more federal funding, hopefully coming to Vermont. But the hopeful news is that we already have a framework in place because of the advocacy of so many here today. So I'm unfortunately have a meeting with the governor that started 3 minutes ago. So I am going to jump off. I'm going to tell him exactly where I was and that childcare still remains a priority for me. Please know that my office is your office. I'm so proud of you. I hear you, I see you, and I look forward to working with you every day throughout the rest of the session and for the months and hopefully years to come. Thank you and have a wonderful day.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for this morning's speakers, Governor Molly Gray and Senator Becca Balint. We are thrilled to have such strong leaders in the state who are committed to supporting children and families. My name is Beth Krzyzanski. I am the Deputy Director at Building Bright Futures. Building Bright Futures is Vermont's early childhood public-private partnership charged under Vermont's Act 104 to serve as the State Advisory Council on Early Childhood, the mechanism used to advise the governor and legislature on the status of children in the prenatal period through age 8 and their families. BBF's mission is to improve the well-being of children and families in Vermont by using evidence to inform policy and bringing voices together across sectors and within regions to discuss critical challenges and problem solve. We are thrilled to be here with you today for Early Childhood Day at the Legislature. Thank you to the Alliance for bringing us together. It is now my pleasure to introduce Polly Major. Polly has been a champion for building strong systems for our children and families at both the local, state, and federal levels. Polly currently serves as outreach representative for Senator Leahy and is the Vermont staff person on early childhood issues. She's been closely tracking issues in DC and was invited us to give us an update on what's going on. Polly, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Beth, and good morning, everyone. It's great to be with you today. It's always too bad not to be able to see all your faces and hope that we can be together in person shortly in the future. As Beth mentioned, I'm Polly Major. I'm a field representative for Senator Leahy, covering a range of issues, including health, housing, human services, education, and nutrition for Senator Leahy here in Vermont. And kind of in that role, I work to ensure that the senator has the strong connection that he needs and looks for with Vermonters so that he can lift up the voices of Vermont advocates and stakeholders and families in his work in Congress. I also want to put in a little note this morning that I'm actually 8 months pregnant and a little short on breath. So if I sound breathless, it's because something is taking up space by my lungs. Just wanted to add that in there. So moving on from the personal update, I also want to start by acknowledging the role your voices play in lifting up the needs of children and really centering them in our nation's domestic policy agenda. we've seen a huge shift over the past few years as the pandemic brought to the forefront of so many people's minds what all of you knew and what all of you have been saying for decades, that the systems that support our families, that support our children, they are essential, and that they are struggling, and that they need federal support in order to truly serve families and children the way they are designed to. So as I'm going to do my best to give a kind of broad overview of the issues at play in Congress right now that are a backdrop to so much of your work advocating here in the state. It's quite an exciting morning in DC, actually, and I don't get to say that very often. Last night, Congress finally reached an agreement on a fiscal year 22 spending bill. This bill is going to move through the House and Senate over the next several days, but we now have some bill text and a clear understanding of what's going to be used to fund the government for the remainder of this fiscal year. So I will say that the 2,741 page long bill dropped at 1:30 this morning. I have not read it all. I'll do my best to answer questions on it. But in broad terms, what this is it's a $1.5 trillion omnibus spending package that funds domestic spending at a 6.7% increase over last year, which is the largest increase we've seen in 4 years in domestic spending. And we know that coming out of this pandemic and continuing to contend with the pandemic, the needs are much greater than that 6.7% increase represents. But this has to be passed as a bipartisan package. And so we're really proud to see that significant increase on the domestic spending side. Because it's bipartisan, it also has an increase on the defense side as well. And then it also carries with it 2 supplemental packages that are critical, a little outside of our advocacy space this morning, but I did want to mention that there's $15.6 billion in there as a COVID supplemental to ensure that we can continue to develop therapeutics and distribute vaccines, and that we can continue to do this not only in our country, but around the world. And there's also a $3.6 billion Ukraine supplemental, both for defense efforts and also for much needed humanitarian efforts in Ukraine. To get into a few of the specifics, I want to take a quick look at the portion of this huge package that touches some of the programs that you all work with. So it's exciting to see that there are increases in early childhood education programs, in the Child Care and Development Block Grant Program, in Head Start, and in the Preschool Development Grant Program as well as other increases across the board that I haven't been able to look at. Unfortunately, this is a bipartisan package, and some things that we know are critical are not included. Chief among them is the waiver authority for the USDA to continue the school meal expansion that's been going on under the COVID relief bills over the last 2 years. That expansion comes to an end at the end of this June, and as of yet, the USDA does not have the authority to continue essentially offering those universal school meals. That's something that Senator Leahy was a strong advocate for. Unfortunately, there was not bipartisan support for those provisions. I know that is certainly a blow to the school meal community and to many households around the country. This bill is a long overdue bill. The end of the fiscal year was last September. Took a long time to get to this place, but we're really glad we finally got here, because had we continued with last year's budget, it would have been a budget written under the Trump administration that does not give the Biden administration the ability to respond to today's needs. So we're proud to get here. It is bipartisan, so it does represent months of compromise on both sides, but it's important that we support the programs that touch not just every Vermont child, but also every Vermont family and all of us. So that's I kind of think of this update as talking about systemic change and structural and maintaining our structures. So the omnibus maintains our structures, which do a lot to support families. On the systemic change side, I know you all have been following closely over the last year the efforts of the Democrats in the House and the Senate to put together a reconciliation package that addresses the needs of families. That package, known as Build Back Better, unfortunately hit a roadblock in December and is not going to move forward as it is currently envisioned. We're deeply, deeply disappointed by this because we know that the childcare expansions in that package, the family medical leave program, the child tax credit expansion, all are critical to helping our systems that have been really hurt by COVID and hurt and inadequate before then, really serve people in the way they need to. So it is heartbreaking to see that package stall in the Senate. Unfortunately, it needs unanimous support by all of the Democratic caucus, and it did not have that at the end of last year. So the question is, where do we go from here? These issues are too important to just leave on the table. And we heard in President Biden's State of the Union, his vision for a path forward that focuses on putting forward legislation that really tackles the affordability challenges facing American families today. And as he talked about the universe of affordability, he did speak especially to childcare. And I think it's really important that that got called out, and that continues to be at the center of the debate of what does it mean to support families. So we've also heard from Senator Manchin that he signaling his interest in doing something to address affordability. And he laid out a broad outline for a package that he'd be willing to negotiate on that includes tax reform, prescription drug pricing reform, as well as climate change investments and social investments. He also emphasized that the package he envisions would be smaller than Build Back Better, and that any social programs would be permanent. So you're likely to see a reduced scope of programs, but for a longer time period if these negotiations move forward. And the question then is where do we go from here? The clock is certainly ticking on this Congress. After we dispense with the omnibus, which should be by next Tuesday, the Senate's going to take up the historic nomination of Judge Brown Jackson, and that will really take up most of the rest of this current work period. So we're looking at likely May before there's serious negotiations on what could a new reconciliation affordability package look like. And as we look to the future, your role is to make sure that the needs of children and family continue to be central to that debate. There's a lot of talk about gas prices and energy and all these other pieces that affect affordability for families, but you do such a wonderful job and a beautiful job centering the needs of children in this debate. And that's going to be even more important as we move forward and look at what we can do with the remainder of this Congress. So thank you for the advocacy you've been doing. This is Senator Leahy's final year. He has really valued his partnership with all of you over the last 47 years as you fought together for the needs of Vermont's children. He knows there's more to do. He's excited by the next generation of leaders. And he just asked me to thank you all for the work that you're doing to raise up the voices of Vermonters. So with that, I'll move to question and answer if we have any time.
Unfortunately, we are running right up on our time to go into the issue sessions. So I will compile the questions that I saw and get those to you. But now I'm going to hand it off to Allie Richards from Let's Grow Kids, who will send us off to our issue sessions.
Hi, everyone. Wow, 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 wow. Okay. The world is listening. I just thank you so much, Polly. Thank you so much to all of our speakers this morning. We clearly are a loud collective voice for all the needs of children in all different dimensions. And I guess people are finally realizing what you all have known your whole lives probably. You want to change the world? Start with our kids, of course. So I'm just so honored to be among you all today. It's a wonderful day, wonderful agenda, and we're going to move into our issue sessions now. So logistically, right now, this Zoom will close that you're on. Then click on View Session as it appears in your agenda screen in the platform HOVA. Staff is standing by to assist you with any problems, so see their contact information in the chat. Again, this will close down and you need to click on the View Session for your next session. And thank you for, Bella really appreciates that comment. She's here for it all day. So thank you all so much. If you need help, the contact info is here. People are standing by. And again, welcome to the day. We're so excited to be here. And we'll see you all at your next sessions, then gathered together later in the day.